The sky over Durban was heavy with dark clouds, and the rain fell in fast, cold sheets that blurred the streets. Naledi gripped the steering wheel, her old car's wipers squeaking as they fought to clear her view. She was already running late. Cabello, her 10-year-old son, sat beside her, hugging his school bag to his chest, watching raindrops race across the window. The morning rush meant traffic was slow, and every minute ticked louder in Naledi's mind. She needed to drop Cabello at school and still make it to her cashier job on time. As they turned onto a quieter road, Cabello spotted him first, a man by the roadside, bent over a bicycle with a chain dangling loose. His clothes were soaked, his hands black with grease, and the rain pounded mercilessly on his back. Car after car sped past, sending up sprays of dirty water, but no one stopped. The man looked up briefly, his expression a mix of frustration and resignation, then went back to struggling with the chain. Naledi's first instinct was to keep driving. She didn't have time. The rain was too heavy, and she couldn't risk being late again. Her manager had already warned her, but as they passed, she caught a glimpse of the man's face. Something in the tired determination there reminded her of herself, of all the times she had stood alone in her own battles. "Mama," Cabello said softly, "should we help him?" Naledi hesitated, the ticking clock loud in her head. But then she sighed, pulling the car to the curb a few meters ahead. She could almost hear her late mother's voice telling her, "Kindness doesn't wait for convenience." She turned off the engine, grabbed the small toolbox she always kept in the boot, and stepped out into the rain. The cold water soaked through her sweater instantly, but she didn't care. Cabello followed, holding an umbrella over her as they approached the man. He looked up in surprise, then smiled gratefully. Naledi knelt beside the bike, already scanning the chain. "Let's see what we can do," she said, her voice steady despite the rush in her chest. And in that moment, on a rainy Durban roadside, a simple decision was about to change everything. The rain showed no mercy, dripping down Naledi's face as she crouched beside the bicycle. Thabiso, though she didn't yet know his name, watched in astonishment as she pulled out a small wrench and an old rag from her battered toolbox. Cabello stood close, trying to shield both of them with the umbrella, but the wind kept whipping the cold rain onto their backs. "It's just the chain," the man said, his voice deep but warm. "It came loose when I hit a pothole." His fingers were already black with grease, but Naledi took the wrench from him and worked quickly, her hands moving with practiced confidence. "You've done this before," he said, half smiling. "Too many times," she replied, tightening the chain back into place. "My brother used to ride everywhere, and I was always the one fixing his bike when he broke it." Cabello handed her the rag so she could wipe her hands, and within minutes the bike was ready again. The man tested the pedals, his face lighting up with relief. "You have no idea how much this means," he said. "Please, let me repay you, at least for your time." Naledi shook her head, stepping back toward the car. "It's just kindness. We all need it sometimes." "But I insist," he began. She smiled politely, cutting him off. "You'd do the same for someone else. That's enough for me." She turned to Cabello. "Come on, we'll be late." The man hesitated, clearly wanting to say more, but finally just gave a small nod. "Thank you, truly." They didn't exchange full names, only a final wave as he climbed back onto his bike, water dripping from his helmet. Naledi watched in the rearview mirror as he pedaled away, disappearing into the misty rain. Driving off, she felt a quiet satisfaction, though she pushed the thought aside. Life didn't often reward small gestures like this. Cabello glanced at her with a proud smile, and she ruffled his hair before focusing back on the road. Neither of them knew that the man they'd just helped would soon step back into their lives, changing everything in ways they couldn't imagine. By the time Naledi reached the supermarket where she worked, her shoes were damp and her hair still held traces of the morning rain. She tied on her apron quickly and hurried to her cashier station, hoping her late arrival wouldn't be noticed. But almost immediately, her manager's voice cut through the store noise. "You're late again, Naledi," he said sharply, glancing at the clock. "This is becoming a habit. Customers don't wait for you to stroll in." She bit her tongue, swallowing the urge to explain about the man with the broken bicycle. She'd learned long ago that excuses only made things worse here. The morning passed in a blur of scanning groceries and fake smiles. Around midday, a customer slammed a packet of bread on the counter. "This is stale. How do you people even sell this?" the woman snapped, her tone dripping with contempt. Naledi apologized, offered to replace it, and kept her voice calm, though her cheeks burned. The woman muttered something under her breath before walking away, leaving Naledi to force a steady breath and move to the next customer. When her shift ended, she picked Cabello up from school. He was unusually chatty, swinging his backpack as they walked. "Mama, everyone at school is talking about big changes," he said. "They say we're getting a new head. Some kids say he's strict. Others say he's really nice." Naledi smiled faintly. "You know how children talk. Probably just stories." "No, Mama, I think it's true," Cabello insisted. "The teachers are acting different, and there's a meeting tomorrow." She nodded absently, her mind still on the long day. Gossip about school leadership was the least of her worries. Rent was due, Her hours at work might be cut, and the prices at the market seemed to rise every week. Cabello's excitement washed over her, but she didn't dwell on it. As they walked home, the sky still threatened rain. Naledi focused on the simple goal of getting through the evening. The talk of a new head was just noise to her. She couldn't know that it would soon become the center of her world. The afternoon air was heavy and damp, carrying the smell of wet soil from the morning rain. Naledi sat outside her small home, peeling vegetables for supper while Cabello kicked a worn soccer ball across the yard. The neighborhood was alive with the usual hum: children laughing, music from a distant radio, the clatter of dishes from nearby kitchens. She was lost in thought, running through the day's struggles in her mind, when the sound of a bicycle chain clicking grew louder. She looked up just in time to see a familiar figure pedaling down the street. It was the man from that rainy roadside. His clothes were drier now, but his presence was just as striking. Thabiso slowed his bike as he passed, his eyes lighting up with recognition. A wide, genuine smile spread across his face, the kind that felt warm even from a distance. He raised a hand in greeting. Naledi's surprise quickly melted into a small smile of her own, and she lifted her hand to wave back. Cabello paused his game, squinting at the cyclist. "Mama, that's the man we helped this morning," he called out. "I see," she replied, still waving as Thabiso glided past. He didn't stop, but his eyes lingered on hers for a moment longer than a casual greeting would allow, almost as if he wanted to say something, but the moment wasn't right. As the sound of his bike faded, Naledi found herself still looking down the road, wondering where he might live and what kind of person he was. There had been something calm yet determined in his expression earlier, and it stayed with her now. She shook her head lightly, returning to her vegetables. People came and went in the city. You helped where you could, then life moved on. Still, she couldn't ignore the odd comfort of seeing a familiar face outside the walls of her routine. Cabello returned to his game, and the neighborhood noise filled the space again. Naledi didn't know that this simple wave was the second step toward a connection that would soon reshape both their lives. The call came just after midday, breaking Naledi's focus as she sorted through her till at work. The school secretary's voice was polite but firm. "Ms. Dlamini, we need you to come in for a meeting regarding Cabello. The new principal would like to see you this afternoon." Naledi's stomach tightened instantly. She knew her son wasn't perfect, but hearing that the principal himself wanted to meet her felt serious. As she made her way to the school later that day, her mind raced with worries. She imagined a strict man in a suit, frowning over a list of complaints. Principals, in her experience, were unapproachable figures, more interested in rules than in children's feelings. At the school gates, Cabello was waiting, his face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment. "Mama, it wasn't fair," he blurted out before she could even greet him. "The teacher blamed me for talking, but I wasn't the only one. I tried to explain, but she wouldn't listen." His hands balled into fists at his sides. Naledi sighed, smoothing his hair. "We'll talk about it inside." She led him toward the office, her heart pounding a little faster with each step. The corridors buzzed with the usual after-school chatter, but all she could hear was her own nervous thoughts. The secretary looked up as they entered. "The principal is expecting you," she said, gesturing toward a closed door. Naledi took a deep breath. She could already picture the stiff handshake, the lecture about discipline, the thin smile that meant the conversation was over before it began. She squeezed Cabello's hand once, before knocking softly and pushing the door open. The scent of polished wood and faint cologne drifted out. She braced herself, ready to face the usual wall of formality. But she didn't know that on the other side of that desk was not just a principal. He was someone whose path had already crossed hers in the most unexpected way. And in a moment, that connection would turn this dreaded meeting into something far different than she imagined. Naledi stepped into the office, ready to greet a stranger, but the moment her eyes met the man behind the desk, her breath caught. It was him, the man from the rainy roadside, Thabiso. He was no longer in soaked clothes with grease on his hands. Now he sat in a perfectly pressed navy suit, a silver tie knotted neatly at his collar. The polished wood of the desk framed him like a picture, but his surprised expression was anything but formal. His eyes widened, the corners crinkling with instant recognition. "You," he began, rising from his chair. Naledi blinked, almost unsure if she was imagining it. "It's you," she said softly, the memory of that drenched morning flashing in her mind. For a moment, the office was silent except for the muffled sounds of children in the distance. The tension she had carried into the room began to shift. This wasn't the intimidating, cold principal she had expected. Thabiso smiled, warm and genuine. "I didn't think I'd see you again, Ms." He left the question hanging. "Dlamini?" "Naledi Dlamini," she replied, still a little stunned. He nodded slowly. "Naledi, you and your son saved me a great deal of trouble that morning. I never got to thank you properly." Cabello stood beside her, looking between them in surprise. "You know each other?" he asked. Thabiso's gaze shifted to Cabello with a friendly nod. "We've met. Your mother is a very kind woman." Naledi's nervousness began to fade, replaced by curiosity. How had she helped someone who now turned out to be the head of her son's school? Thabiso gestured toward the chairs in front of his desk. Please, have a seat. I think we should talk. As they sat down, Naledi could feel the weight of the moment settling around her. What had started as a dreaded meeting was turning into something entirely unexpected. She didn't know where this conversation would lead, but one thing was certain. This connection was about to change more than just Cabello's school life. Thabiso leaned back slightly in his chair, his expression softer than any principal Naledi had ever met. I meant it when I said you saved me trouble that morning, he began. I was new in the area, just riding around to get to know the neighborhood before I officially started here. That bike breaking down in the rain could have ruined my whole day. But then you stopped. Naledi gave a small shrug, her hands folded neatly in her lap. It was nothing, just kindness. It was more than that, he replied gently. Most people passed by without a glance. His eyes held hers for a moment, and she found herself looking away, unused to someone acknowledging her efforts like this. He asked about her life, not in the casual way people do to fill silence, but as if he truly wanted to know. Do you work nearby? Yes, she said slowly. At the supermarket as a cashier. I've been there for years. It's steady, but not easy. He nodded, encouraging her to go on. She hesitated. Usually when she spoke about her struggles, late shifts, bills piling up, raising Cabello alone, people's eyes glazed over, or they changed the subject. But Thabiso listened, leaning forward slightly, his brow furrowed with genuine interest. And your son, he said, glancing at Cabello. He's bright. I can tell. But it sounds like things have been unfair for him here. Naledi's lips pressed together. He tries hard, but sometimes it feels like no one sees that. I see it, Thabiso said simply, and the certainty in his voice caught her off guard. The office felt strangely quiet, the walls holding in this unexpected moment of honesty. Naledi wasn't sure what to make of it. She had walked in bracing for criticism, yet here she was, being heard, really heard, by someone she'd known for only a day. Thabiso smiled faintly. I think we can change a few things around here. Naledi didn't know exactly what he meant, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope. The very next day, Thabiso began to act on what he had promised. He visited Cabello's classroom quietly, standing at the back as the lesson went on. His presence made the teacher stand a little straighter, her tone more careful. After class, he asked her to stay behind. Their conversation was calm but firm. He explained that every student deserved the same respect, no matter who they were or where they came from. It wasn't a lecture, but it was clear that change was expected. Thabiso spoke not only about Cabello's incident, but about the overall culture of the school. We are here to guide, not to crush spirits, he told the staff later in a meeting. His words carried weight, and his sincerity made it hard for anyone to dismiss him. Within a week, small differences began to show. Teachers greeted students by name. Complaints were handled fairly. Cabello came home one afternoon beaming, telling Naledi that his teacher had praised his work in front of the class. It was a small moment, but Naledi could see the way it lit up her son's confidence. Word started to spread beyond the school walls. At the market, a woman approached Naledi, saying she'd heard the new principal was different, kind, but not weak. Parents began sharing stories of how he had taken time to listen to their children, how he greeted them at the gates in the mornings, asking about their days. One Saturday, Thabiso even organized a student voices meeting where pupils could speak about what they wanted to see change. Cabello came home from it talking nonstop, amazed that an adult had not only asked for his opinion, but written it down. Naledi watched all this quietly, feeling a mix of gratitude and disbelief. She had expected her son's issues to be brushed aside, yet here was a man who treated them as important. The image of him stranded in the rain felt like a lifetime ago. Now, he was a figure who seemed to be pulling not just Cabello, but the whole school into a better place, one respectful conversation at a time. One afternoon, Naledi was surprised when Thabiso asked if she could stay after a parent meeting. She waited nervously in the office, wondering if something had happened with Cabello. But when Thabiso entered, his expression wasn't stern. It was thoughtful. I've been meaning to talk to you, he began, sitting across from her. You've been a great support to your son, and I've seen how dedicated you are, even in difficult circumstances. The school is starting a community program to involve more parents, and I think you'd be perfect for it. Naledi blinked, unsure what to say. Me? I'm not sure I have the skills for something like that. Thabiso smiled. You already do. We're looking for someone to help with part-time administrative work, organizing schedules, helping with events, assisting parents when they come in. The hours would be better than your current job, and the pay is an improvement too. Plus, you'd be here, close to Cabello. Her mind immediately jumped to the supermarket. Long shifts on her feet, the constant stress, the rude customers. This could mean steadier hours, more time for Cabello, and maybe even the chance to breathe for once. But doubt still lingered. Why me? She asked quietly. Because you care, Thabiso said simply, and caring is something you can't teach. The sincerity in his voice left her without words. She had grown so used to being overlooked that the idea of someone seeing her potential felt almost unreal. He slid a small folder across the desk. Take it home, read through it. No pressure, but I think this could be a good step for you. Naledi took the folder, feeling its weight in her hands. For the first time in years, she was holding something that felt like possibility. As she walked home with Cabello, he chattered about his day, and she listened with a quiet smile. She hadn't made her decision yet, but deep down, she already knew. Opportunities like this didn't come often, and when they did, they could change everything. Weeks later, the morning sun streamed through the school gates as Naledi walked in, no longer as a hurried visitor, but as part of the staff. She wore a neat blouse and skirt, her ID badge hanging proudly around her neck. The familiar hum of children's voices filled the air, but this time she felt a sense of belonging instead of the usual rush to leave. Inside the office, she greeted the secretary with a warm smile and set her bag on the desk that was now hers. Stacks of neatly arranged files, a working computer, and a vase with fresh flowers sat in place. Small details that reminded her how far she had come from the supermarket's harsh fluorescent lights and impatient queues. Thabiso stepped out of his office, giving her a nod and a smile. Morning, Naledi, ready for the parents' meeting? Always, she replied with quiet confidence. As the day moved forward, she answered phone calls, welcomed parents, and organized schedules with ease. Every so often, she caught glimpses of Cabello in the courtyard, laughing with his friends, no longer weighed down by unfair treatment. That alone made every effort worth it. During a short break, she sat by the window, watching the playground. Her thoughts drifted back to that rainy morning, the worn bicycle, the drenched clothes, the quick decision to stop and help. At the time, it had felt like nothing more than a small act of kindness. She hadn't expected it to circle back into her life in such a profound way. If she had driven past that day, she might still be at the supermarket, chasing hours and swallowing frustration. Instead, she was here, working in a place where she felt valued, where her time and care mattered. She took a deep breath, a smile touching her lips. Sometimes life didn't change with grand plans. It shifted quietly, starting with a single choice on an ordinary day. As she rose to get back to work, one thought echoed in her mind. Sometimes the road you stop on leads you exactly where you're meant to be.